It's good to see the South African Film Festival, largely online, will be happening from the 7th to the 24th of May this year. And it's my great pleasure to be speaking to the program director for the South African Film Festival, Ricky Human. Ricky, welcome to Movie Metropolis.
Hello, Peter. Lovely to be with you today.
Good to talk to you, Ricky. And it's really nice to see South African cinema, because we don't often see South African films in Australia. So this gives us a great opportunity. Tell me about the issues that South Africa has faced because of COVID, the film industry, and being able to produce films.
Look, to give you the short answer, I attended a local interest festival in South Africa during March, and one of the speakers on one of the panels said, during COVID or pre-COVID, we had between 60 to 70,000 people in the sector, and last year it was only 12,500. It just shows the huge impact it's also had on the South African industry. I mean, as it is, you know, it is a development.
Oh, I lost you.
Oh no, what happened? We just hung. Oh, yeah.
Okay, let's keep going. You were talking about the impact on the industry and also about films being made.
Yes. So I think, like with any film and all the film industries and TV industries around the world, if you're already producing for TV, you were kind of okay because you could continue with certain productions. Obviously on films and big series, it started tremendously. So everything slowed down. Everything, we did a mentorship program for short films, it slowed down completely. The actual production period happened much later. So, and of course, pre-COVID, there was already other challenges facing the industry, like, for instance, access to funding and socio-economical challenges regarding to get to the grassroots. You know, government funded bodies were trying their best to also work on transformation in the film and TV industry, but they've always been struggling to get, and they created more opportunities for funding, but it's always been quite a mission to get the word out to the communities. So all in all, I mean, that was just going into COVID, then production kind of stopped. Habits changed, as you know, people started doing more content online. And Netflix was already in South Africa, but they weren't that strong. So obviously what happened with everybody, like everybody else around the world, the positive of COVID, the new digital platforms boomed. Amazon is now setting up shop also in South Africa, which is great. It's more opportunities for our local filmmakers. And of course, there's a lot of funding that's now provided through, you know, partnerships and collaborations. So I think all in all, although everything slowed down tremendously, there's now quite a nice boost into the industry as well. So hopefully this will sustain the local film industry and help it to develop even further. And the nice thing about the kind of the viewing habits that's also changed is the filmmakers are being more adventurous now. So they're taking more risks and they're telling more authentic stories because they have a variety of platforms that they now can appeal to, where everybody always wanted to first be in cinemas. They now have other opportunities, which is great, and it changes kind of the way of they're also thinking about their own films. But being back in South Africa, I think the story now is just talking about how can we sustain the local film and TV industry and growing audiences and helping educating filmmakers how to access all of this funding.
Okay, that's very interesting to hear that. I gather that over the last few years, not a huge number of films, though, have been produced, because I can imagine, because of restrictions, the actual number, which I suspect will be similar to how many films in Australia have been produced, would be relatively low.
Correct. So basically what happened, like most industries, it went into short format. So there were more short films. I mean, documentaries sometimes takes years to develop in any event. so it slowed down the development, but there were more documentaries available and short films, but not so many feature films, no. So I'm hoping in the festivals to come after ours, because we are already locked our program early January, you will see more South African feature films coming out of the woodworks, shall I say, or off the shelf, and ready to go, and also to get those wonderful international accolades.
Exactly, because it's such a vibrant industry, and I remember films like Tsotsi and other South African films that have been quite prominent, have won awards, and it's quite a vibrant sort of community that produces a number of interesting films.
Well, if you think about it, it's such a I think people forget that we have 11 official local languages in South Africa. So it just shows you, just from a language perspective, the diversity, the cultural diversity, it's huge. And the migrants that now also live in South Africa, it's quite a melting pot of diverse cultures and vibrant cultures all in one sort of setting.
It certainly is. So anyway, it's good that we're able to experience that now. And it's interesting how you've had to pivot, as you've done previously last few years, online, because although I'm interested that there's only a couple of films being screened in cinema.
Correct. And I think it's also us testing the waters to see which films will resonate in cinema, which films are, because once you go into cinema, the cost of releasing a film into cinema is it's quite big. We are a charity. I mean, we have to always think of ourselves as a festival with a conscience. And our whole festival, the goal or the mission of our festival is to raise funds for education in South Africa. So we do try and limit our costs as much as possible. So every year we try and find those films that we believe will appeal to quite a diverse community and expats, and obviously other film lovers in Australia and New Zealand. And then when we kind of look at our program and say, okay, we think this will work or that will work. And so we kind of still in that exploration phase, I reckon, to see how many cinemas and how many films we could release in cinema, and kind of just to break even when we go into cinema, so that, we'll always, I think, we'll have an online component as well to reach everyone.
Fair enough. And it's also screening not just in Australia, but in New Zealand as well. So that gives you much broader coverage.
Correct. So the hybrid format, I think, is not unique to our local interest festival. I think a lot of local interest festivals are kind of staying in that lane, because it will give more people access to the festival, which is great. So definitely New Zealand online and Australia, across Australia. So we're very excited to bring these films to people, in different areas. And every year we get wonderful volunteers, new volunteers from different areas that join our festival, that's happy to also help market the festival in their local communities, which is also great.
Excellent stuff. Okay, now you've got over 20 films, I've noticed, short films, feature films, and documentaries. And let's talk about some of them, because the opening film in cinema is a documentary called Nobody's Died Laughing. That sounds intriguing.
Yes, so Nobody's Died Laughing is actually the life story and journey of one of South Africa's well-known and very popular satirists called Pieter Dirk Uys. Now, Pieter Dirk Uys has obviously been in the industry for many, many years. And I read an article on Variety, because he also performs around the world. He's not just known to South Africans. And he performs in his also known as characters. So his alter ego in this Nobody's Died Laughing, or one of his very popular alter egos, is Evita Besaidnout. So he dresses up as Evita Besaidnout, which is a very sort of astute woman. And what he does, and what the Variety, I think, summarized this so well, is he kind of skewers the apartheid era attitudes in the way he kind of interviews and talks to people. And he kind of, he talks to them about the power of laughter and also about fighting for what your own beliefs are and what you believe in your cultural society, which I think is so wonderful. So in this documentary specifically, he goes on a journey to London and Berlin and all over the world, speaking to expats. So much so that he's also spoken to Charlize Theron. He speaks to Desmond Tutu, and in his days, even Nelson Mandela, he did an interview with Nelson Mandela as he visited the same night, and he got so much praise from Nelson Mandela for his interview as well. So I think it's something that's very interesting. It kind of takes you on this nostalgic journey as well as it talks to people about who they are, who they identify with in their culture, what their beliefs are. And it's in a wonderful sort of humoristic way.
Very good indeed. And it's so interesting how the post-apartheid era in South Africa now, Mandela, and the changes that have been happening in South African society are reflected so much by many filmmakers.
Absolutely. And I think now with everyone finding their own voices and really telling such authentic personal stories, I think you're now getting a whole different kind of sort of informative way of the different vibrant cultures that are in South Africa, and also the stories and how people live and kind of the everyday South Africans, which is lovely.
Very good indeed. Now, I noticed that the closing film, which will also be in cinema, and we'll get to the online films in a moment, is a film I've heard a bit about. It's a story of a gay soldier, isn't it? A film called Moffie?
So there are two closing films, actually. Moffie, and then also Moffie. Moffie will only be screening at Bondi for the closing night at 7 p.m. But then we also brought Beyond Moving into our closing night cinema. And Beyond Moving is a film that also debuted at Dock Edge in New Zealand. A wonderful inspirational story about this young ballet dancer, Sipa November, that was discovered in a local town in South Africa. And then he became part of the Canadian School of Ballet. So that's one. And then the other one, obviously, is Moffie. Yes, Moffie is a gay soldier. It's kind of like, it tells a story of a very interesting director called Oliver Hermanus, who's now was nominated for a BAFTA. The film was nominated for a BAFTA, actually, for the, sorry for my phone, yeah, for Jack City, and for an outstanding British writer. And it's got to do with the military conscription in South Africa that was there for many, many years. And this young gay soldier that was conscripted for military training and the Angola border. And just how he struggled, with this whole militaristic kind of training, and coming from a homosexual background, how he was discriminated against in many ways.
Okay. Very good, very good. Now, I've had a chance to look at a film called Atlantis, which is set, I think, in Cape Town. It's a crime thriller. And I thought, how interesting. Here is another film about crime and drama in a South African community. I thought, although this obviously is a fictional film, but it's the focus is on a woman who tries to fight for justice. It's a very interesting film, I thought.
Well, the thing is, I mean, the filmmakers also, Mick Ricards and Paul Egan, they also made the film. I don't know if you ever saw the film called Tess, which won the Durban Best Film a couple of years ago. And this film was about a prostitute in Cape Town as well, a white prostitute, and her livelihood and how she had to fight for her survival. So the filmmakers themselves, I think what they do very well is they take characters. So it is contemporary. It's set in a township in Atlantis, which is a township area. And this is basically everyday life for this community. And obviously gangs, drugs, and especially in the taxi ranks, is very rife. There's always infighting with the taxi ranks, there's shootings. So in fact, it's a very authentic story. And I think that's why it kind of appeals to you, because it resonates with people, because it's so authentic and it's set in that community.
Okay, very good, very good. That's certainly one of the highlights of the festival. Let's talk about some of the some of the other films, and it's nice to see a romantic comedy in there. I haven't looked at it yet. Mrs. Right Guy.
Yes, of course we decided, looking at South African films, sometimes it's either very heavily political or it is kind of human interest stories that may not always have a positive outcome and a light feel to it. So we kind of made a pact this year to bring something for everybody in our South African Film Festival. So we took a film that's done exceptionally well in the South African cinema as a contemporary love interest story, set in a marketing sort of in an advertising kind of agency field, with this young woman that's now being, let's call it, what's the word when you actually woo someone, or she's being chased by two young men in the industry, and now she has to choose who's the right guy. So it's a very formulaic, beautiful, just nice romance story set in Gauteng, in Johannesburg, actually.
Okay. Now, as a contrast, I noticed a documentary which sounds quite powerful. Dance Me to the End of Time.
Yes, so this was one of the award-winning filmmakers in the documentary field, Melanie Chait, that actually took 4 years, and she followed her partner around, and her partner has obviously passed away from breast cancer. So she went on this journey and she documented her to the end, and that's why the film's sort of based on Leonard Cohen's song, Dance Me to the End of Time, is just such a lovely, it's not just a story about breast cancer or what do you do in the time of facing death. It's just the way she embraced it. That she knew this was what was happening with her, and all the things, because she was a theater director, her partner, and all the wonderful things that she's done in her life, and how she kind of worked with her. They adopted a son, and how they explained all of this. So it's beautifully done. It's a sad story, obviously, but it is more about celebrating life than it is about, losing a person.
Okay, very good. Now, another one that struck me, a film called We Are Zama Zama, which has a political edge to it. Tell me about that one.
It does indeed. It's a very interesting story. Rosalind Norris put this film together, and it's a documentary about informal miners in some of the abandoned shafts in South Africa. Now, what's happened, a lot of these migrants come over to South Africa, and of course, as you know, in South Africa, or you may know, the unemployment rate is already quite high. And they come across to South Africa thinking, this is where you can literally find gold, and then they are stuck to survive. So it's actually quite dangerous. They go down these shafts, they build this community, they live inside these shafts. And then they found some gold, so now they're digging for gold. And often their lives are in danger doing this.
Okay. And I noticed a drama, which sounds also quite intriguing, also set in Cape Town, by the looks of it, a film called Sons of the Sea.
Yes, this is also a fictional drama, but I think it's set against a very interesting backdrop that's also very contemporary in the South African fishing industries. And it's got to do with abalone smuggling. So in Cape Town. And it's basically set amongst, it's these two brothers, and how they will each try and get the best sort of money for their abalone that they take out of the seas. But they do it, obviously, it's kind of enduring with the corrupt government officials and the whole kit and caboodle into one form, but it's set against that backdrop, which I think could also be interesting, for other fishing communities that's dealing with quotas and dealing with issues of how to survive in the fishing industry when so many things are not available to you. So it's a beautifully shot film. It's also got beautiful scenery of Cape Town and obviously the fishing communities. So it's definitely one to look out for.
Okay. And another one that struck me is a film called Gaia, about a forest ranger.
Yes. So Gaia actually made its debut at the South by Southwest Festival in Austin, Texas. And it won Best Cinematography at the festival. And the filmmakers actually decided, the guy that wrote the script, he also writes books. And how it came about is this group of people started working together on another project. And they all worked together quite nicely because I actually listened to the entire question and answer session of the whole team, how they all came about to make the film. And they started by what inspired them to put together this film. It came over many, many years. It's the first ecological horror film in Afrikaans, which is also quite a first. And then they decided to do a story around nature and taking simple parables like, actually written down the ones that he mentioned. Give me a minute and I'll tell you now. The parables that he was looking at is how, I can't find my Gaia. Sorry, give me 1 minute. They did just simple biblical parables. They looked at simple biblical parables and then they combined, and they always knew they wanted to make the backdrop about nature. And then nature became the key character in their film. So I'm not going to say anything more, but I think it's very interesting the way this film came together and what it actually means about just the environment in general. And it also kind of makes you think about climate change and how we see nature. So it's a very interesting film from that dynamic and it's a horror. It's quite daunting in a way what nature becomes, the character of nature becomes in this film.
Okay, very good. Now that's just a snapshot of the films, but Ricky, are there any other films that you want to draw my audience's attention to?
There are a couple, and I kind of made a note of one specific film that I thought would be very interesting to have a look at. It's called The Untamed Voice. And this is a film, it's a documentary set on the backdrop of Afrikaans, the Afrikaans music industry. And it will premiere online on Thursday, the 19th of May. And it's a music producer, a well-known music producer and a film producer that came together. And all they wanted to really do is interview a couple of musicians, that were singing or that had a voice in the Afrikaans music industry, and from diverse cultural backgrounds. But what actually came out in the end is that the storyline actually developed quite interestingly in the sense that it kind of then took a really hard look at the industry. And it's quite sad actually to see that there's still quite a few imbalances that exist 30 years after the apartheid era. Simply, many people don't know, but or some people may know, but Afrikaans as a language is spoken by diverse communities. So there are in the brown communities, like David Kramer was a very known musician in the brown communities, and he sang in Afrikaans. And he was actually saying that at one point during the apartheid era, he was only allowed to sing certain songs on the national broadcaster, but then he had a whole host of Afrikaans music that he loved to sing. And so on the one hand, he was kind of banned to sing certain songs, but then he was also allowed to sing songs. So, and it kind of just goes back to about how you identify yourself as an artist with a voice in a culture with a certain language and music. and also how some of these artists were marginalized in the past. So it's quite interesting to look at these artists, who they are. It's got music in it, and it tells a really interesting story that I don't think everybody's actually looked at before.
Sounds good. And nice to see something very different and distinctive. That's terrific. So now, if people want to book to see these films, I suppose they go to the website. Tell me more details about how they do that.
Yes, so you go to www.saf.org.au, and you will see that if you click on the program, you will be able to book your tickets. It will take you through. Our online platform works through Eventive, which is a booking platform. So you basically book your film, and then you will receive an email with a code. So once the film becomes available, every day at 2 p.m. a new film will premiere on our online program, apart from the films that are also obviously in cinema. So the whole program is on our website, listed with the films on every day which film is, and the brief sort of synopsis. So, and at the same time, because of our mission to raise funds for education without borders, we also have a place on our website that you can also make a donation. So we always keep our online tickets, and we keep it at the same rates as every year, just to make sure that people are able to buy a festival pass to access all the films, and be part of the whole experience with us.
Sounds good, and an interesting array of films in this year's South African Film Festival, May the 7th to the 24th, largely online. And Ricky, before I let you go, I must ask you, do you have a favourite South African film?
A favourite South African film? Oh gosh, I'll have to go. I have many favorites, unfortunately, because I don't just have one, because for many years I worked in the South African film and TV industry, and we were involved in the development and funding for a host of South African films. So sure, this is a hard, tough question. Because I think if you go back to, it's either a very historical film or it's a very contemporary film, but I don't have, I think through COVID, the one film that I really thought was probably the most authentic and wonderful family-orientated film that I've seen in the last, in a couple of years, was Barakat.
Okay, very good. Well, look, it's been a pleasure talking to you. We've been speaking to Ricky Human, who is the Program Director for the South African Film Festival. And thanks so much for talking with me.
It was lovely to talk to you today, and I hope you will all join us for the festival to see some of our groundbreaking films and documentaries. And I hope there's one interest for everybody.
I'm sure there is. There's such a diverse program. Thanks so much, Ricky, for talking with me.
Okay, Peter, have a lovely afternoon. Bye.
Bye-bye.